Ontario Premier Doug Ford is denying claims made by a Japanese media outlet that Honda is considering moving production out of Canada as a result of the recent 25% tariff imposed on automobiles by U.S. President Donald Trump. The Honda plant in Alliston, Ontario, north of Toronto, was in line for a massive expansion. Right now, it employs an estimated 4,200 workers. CBC business reporter Anis Hadari is following the story for us and joins us from Calgary. So, Anis, we are hearing there have been developments in the story. What are we hearing from Honda?
Honda is not confirming, denying, or saying anything too specific really about these Japanese reports that say the company was going to move production out of Canada. What Honda is saying is they aren't planning any changes at this time. Here's what the company sent us in a statement. They say this was not an announcement by Honda, and we cannot comment on the specifics of this morning's headlines. However, we can confirm that our Canadian manufacturing facility in Alliston, Ontario will operate at full capacity for the foreseeable future, and no changes are being considered at that time. So that's from the Corporate Communications Department of Honda Canada. These reports were in response to the 25% tariffs that Donald Trump had announced, /threatened, /imposed, /changed between Canada and the United States. So part of the trouble for not just Honda, but anyone looking at the industry has been it's unclear exactly what applies and how much extra it would cost to do business here versus in the United States, Andrew.
And why would this be a move that Honda might consider?
If Honda were to do this, it would be because the U.S. is Honda's biggest market. At least last year, it accounted for nearly 40% of the company's global sales. If we're talking about 1.4 million vehicles sold by Honda in the United States, about 40% of them were imported from either Canada or Mexico. So if we go by the reporting from this Japanese newspaper, what they were saying Honda was aiming for is that 90% of cars sold in the U.S. would be made locally, as in made within the United States. Ostensibly, they could avoid tariffs if that were to occur. The report from the Japanese newspaper said that Honda was planning to gradually shift towards U.S. production and away from Canada and Mexico. Now, the company, as we heard earlier, wouldn't comment on that newspaper report in Japan. It did say Honda is always studying options for future contingency planning, and that sometimes it does shift production, at least in the short term, to, quote, mitigate negative impacts on Honda's business. We have heard from an economist today who points out this is really not an out-to-lunch idea for a company like Honda to change things around in the current context. Take a listen to what he had to say.
And when you're targeting an industry like the car industry, which is known to have very slim margins, it was to be expected that there would be some impact. So now we need some more certainty, because even with the latest exemptions for U.S. producers from the Trump administration, there's still a lot of uncertainty about how firms should behave.
So really, Honda is saying at this point they're not planning any changes. They wouldn't comment on what the Japanese newspaper had said otherwise. But as we've just heard from that economist, it would not be crazy for a company to look at avoiding tariffs, especially when no one really knows exactly what they are going to be, Andrew.
So just a final point on this. What do you make of some of the language around that? It's just like there are no plans on moving right now. I'm paraphrasing. It's for the foreseeable future. It's status quo. I mean, I don't want to be too, finicky about language, but it does feel as though everything is normal until it's not, and we won't tell you when that might be, but it sounds like everything's fine. I'm trying to kind of parse the language.
The way you've put it there is probably a good way to summarize. Everything is fine until it's not. Right now, Honda's saying they're not changing anything. They do make a lot of cars in Alliston, vehicles, I should say. It's not just cars. And they're saying right now they're not going to change that. They're not laying anyone off. They're not changing any production there, but they sort of reserve the right to change things in the future. And there is still a lot of back and forth happening when it comes to exactly how much of a vehicle assembled in Canada would be tariffed. We've seen some confusion around, is it just the parts that get tariffed? Is it the entire car? Is it subject to the Canadian-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, CUSMA? Is it not? So for a company like Honda and for reporters like us and for consumers at home who might want to buy a car, no one really is sure what exactly is going to increase in terms of costs. So for now, Honda is saying we're not changing anything today, but they're also not confirming or denying their future plans as reported by that Japanese newspaper.
Anis, thank you. The CBC's Anis Hadari in Calgary.